There's a lot going on in this movie.
It was like I was watching it for the first time.
I like this movie.
It has a special place in my heart.
Very close to my heart.
This was a good one.
I want to like this movie.
What? Seriously?
I loved it.
Very flat, kind of boring.
This movie blows me away. This movie turns me on.
Terrible. It is terrible. All these keys everywhere. Influences, baby.
Huge fan.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Hello out there in YouTube and podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, where we talk about horror movies and science fiction films and those key elements that lift and separate them from the average genre fare. Are you new to us? Well, we would like to welcome you. David and I are old friends that have been talking movies for far longer than we'd like to admit, and now we do it for you. This is a non-scripted podcast. We may ramble, we may gush, we may praise, we may destroy, we may do all kinds of things to movies that you either love or hate, because we either love or hate them too. And if you're coming back, then you already know this because you've been watching us for a while. I would assume we've been doing this for several seasons now. This is our 7th season, our 2nd episode of the 7th season. And I am here with my good friend, David Horton, and co-host, that is. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah. 2nd episode. Yay. So that's fun. We usually start, or we try to start with what we've been doing our genre week. Have we done anything genre related? That's not necessarily the topic of what we're doing today, but just what we've been up to. And I've been up to just doing some retreads again of stuff, which I do. Whenever I get bored, I can say, hey, I can watch something new, but then I might want to take notes or focus on it or whatever. Or maybe I just go back to my comfort viewing thing. And one of the comforts I did, which was, it wasn't actually comfortable, but it was good, was I went back and revisited the pilot for Babylon 5 because I thought it might be a good tie-in to this particular topic that we have today. Not the first episode that was shown on television, but the pilot, which was like 16 months earlier, that they used to get the financing to actually do the series.
How many months earlier?
From that. It was about 16 months. It was over a year.
Wow. That's like old school television.
Yeah. And they did the pilot and trying to get it greenlit because it went through so many different distribution avenues. And those of us who were fans at the time were literally, and this is no joke, exaggeration, craziness, we were setting our clocks and getting up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to watch a new episode because that's when WGN or whomever at the time was showing it. And that was the only time they would show it.
Like a syndicated channel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was all through syndication. It was a franchise show, so it was all through syndication. It went through 3 different networks. It was just like Star Trek in that every season they thought they would be canceled and didn't know before they were filming the last episode if they were going to be picked up again. I think the premiere was on PTEN. Do you remember that? Primetime Entertainment Network.
No.
That's how obscure it was. Because
I remember
it had
WGN. But not that.
And then WGN later on picked it up. But anyway, brainchild of J. Michael Straczynski, who people who know me or have listened to us in the past know I adore him. I think he's a prolific writer. He's very good, both with comic books, with series, with science fiction, with novels, everything. His autobiography is amazing. If you haven't picked it up, pick it up. But it was interesting to see this because I think it'd be a fun... If anybody's interested in how do I start a series or how do I get backing and everything else, this is a great behind the scenes or a great example of how to do that because you see all the possibilities in this pilot and also all the horrible mistakes
Okay.
Because they don't have enough money, or because the makeup blends aren't good because we didn't have enough time. The sets are obviously very truncated and small because we didn't have the money to build bigger sets, and it's expensive to do a science fiction show. It's much better once you actually watch the first episode and go, oh, okay, yeah, in a year they changed a lot and did a lot. They changed some of the makeup design, they changed a lot of the costuming, they changed the special effects. Also, this was one of the first series that ever used computer graphics and digital effects rather than practical effects. So, and they were doing it literally on what was called an Amiga toaster, which was a video processing computer that
And
at one
microwave.
point, yeah, and it makes your snack as you're editing. But to render all of these graphics that they had, and like Commodore computers, I mean, it was crazy the amount of low budget that and the product that they got out. But anyway, that's all I did. I went back to Babylon 5. I watched the pilot again and saw all the struggles that they did to fix it and course correct it before it became a series, which still my second favorite series of all time. So,
Well, for some reason, I always associate that series with Gene Roddenberry, but it's not him,
well,
right?
no, not no. As a matter of fact, they did this pilot. Nobody really picked it up. They pitched the idea to Paramount to Viacom at the time. No, Paramount. It was Paramount. Sorry. They pitched the idea to Paramount about a space station where our main characters are and all the aliens come to visit them, And they passed on it. Paramount passed on it, said, no, Straczynski, it's terrible, 2 months later, Rick Berman shows up with Deep Space Nine, a new Star Trek franchise set aboard a space station where all of our characters are there and the aliens come and visit us.
Yeah.
And it's been a battle of the Trekkies against the Babylonians ever since.
Interesting. And I was just thinking that it sounds like the pilot was very similar to the way Roddenberry did Trek, because that pilot was out like a year and a half before the show got picked up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he had the cage and he did it, and they all said maybe. And then they had to do Where No Man Has Gone Before they could even go to series.
And everything. Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
And there's some recasting that happens before they go to series, but basically the core was there because, again, the thing that makes Babylon 5 so good is, and modern audiences don't understand, was at this time in the late 90s and everything, there were no serialized. I mean, if you wanted to watch a serialized television show, you watched a soap opera. But everything at night was not serialized. You could watch. Everything was episodic, and we could watch it in any way you wanted. But Straczynski came in with a 5-year series. Here's my series. I need money for 5 years. Each episode's going to be a chapter. Each season's going to be a book. And I'm going to tell 5 books in this series. And he knew how it was going to end from the day he first started shooting it, all of this. But
it got canceled, didn't it?
It got canceled and renewed twice. Yes.
So he finished it.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And and like I said, it's second favorite series of all time because it does tell a complete story all the way through. And I think I've praised it before with you, but I think you would like it, especially if you go under the precept of one of the characters in it is a Macbeth character. And it's basically, even though he may be a supporting character in different seasons, it's basically his story woven all the way through.
Oh, okay.
And it's really interesting. I think you would like it. And it's great science fiction. But anyway, Babylon 5. Go back.
Maybe that'll make for a Patreon show. Who knows?
Ooh, wow. Yeah. Ooh, no, never mind. Okay, yes. What about you? What have you been doing this week?
We're going to venture over into the horror section of the building.
Yeah.
And
let's go down, open this creaky door and go over here through these cobwebs.
In my genre week, I decided, based on our first show of the season, Grindhouse, I decided to go and watch a film called Thanksgiving. I can't.
You did not.
I did.
That's Eli Roth.
I cannot get the word out of my mouth without laughing because it's really funny to make Thanksgiving sounds scary. This is the one that was made into a fake, originated as a fake trailer in 2009's Grindhouse, directed by Eli Roth and his friend Jeff Rendell.
Okay.
And he finally expanded it and released a movie called Thanksgiving last year around Thanksgiving. Imagine that. This is a fun, cliched slasher film roller coaster of a ride. There are definite similarities to the plot of the Grindhouse fake trailer, like the whole Black Friday massacre thing or whatever. But I
Okay.
really, really wish Roth would have stuck to the whole 1970s aesthetic, because this one is set in modern times. So that's a
Yeah.
difference right there that doesn't work for me.
Yeah. It would have
Um,
been so much better.
yeah, I think I'm spoiled. I think Ty West has spoiled me.
He has.
Yeah. Again, I mentioned it was written by and directed by Eli Roth and his friend and collaborator for the fake trailer from Grindhouse, and his name's Jeff Rendell. The cast is great. It mixes a lot of unknown, fresh faces with well-known faces like Patrick Dempsey, Ty Olson, and Gina Gershon. So that was a plus. And it is really outrageous because you know he's going to do very inventive murders a la Friday the 13th, different kinds of kills or different kinds of meals, so to speak. The synopsis is: a mysterious mass maniac terrorizes the residents of Plymouth, Massachusetts 1 year after a Black Friday riot ends in tragedy. Picking off the victims one by one, the seemingly random revenge killings soon become part of a larger, more sinister plan.
Mm.
It gets 84% of Rotten Tomatoes. I would take that down to an 80 at least. It has the potential of a Scream movie because you've got a seasoned horror movie director that plays with the genre. I mean, he plays with the
Yeah.
kills and the ways, just like, but he's just not Wes Craven. Eli Roth is
Hmm.
not Wes Craven. There, I said it. Not yet. Anyway. And I just wish he would have done it more like the trailer where it looked like an old horror movie. But such is life. And that's what I did in my genre week.
Wow. So yeah, I don't know if it'll ever be on my list. Maybe some night or something I would watch it. But I'm not an
Catch
Eli
it
Roth
as a
fan usually. But so I don't know if it would work for me. But it sounds interesting. How do we segue from? Oh, I know how to
well,
segue.
we were
So,
talking about Gene Roddenberry earlier.
well, yeah, that's a good one. So Gene Roddenberry had this vision in the 60s and
Wagon
turned it into
Train,
a series that then ended up inspiring movies and novels and comic books and lots of merchandising, and then
streaming
ended up
platforms.
doing series and eventually streaming platforms. After this, we are actually going to talk about the watershed that literally rebooted Star Trek. Not track, please, it's Trek, but this was the movie we're going to talk about today. Came out in 2009. It was directed by J.J. Abrams. It was written by Alex Kurtzman, who you will hear me say his name with derision quite a bit during this. And Bob, is it Bob Orsi?
Roberto
Robert.
Orci.
Roberto Orsi. Yeah.
Orci.
It was also produced by Damon Lindelof. Some people may know his name from future Star Trek events and also from Lost. So JJ brought him over. It starred John Cho, Ben Cross, Bruce Greenwood, Simon Pegg, Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Winona Ryder. We'll get into the cast when Tim gets into
Yeah,
the
there's
cast.
a lot of cast.
There's a lot of cast. It came out in 2009. There is some history leading up to that I'll get to in a minute. But before we jump into production and all that fun stuff, you had seen this movie before, right? This
I
wasn't
went
your
and saw
first
this in a
one.
theater. Then I immediately rented the DVD when it was released a few months later. And then that's
Hmm.
the last time I had seen it until I watched it the other night, like 2 nights ago.
Okay.
I I actually love this movie. I have some issues with it as far as a little bit of logic. I mean, there's some things where I go, wait a minute. But then they're so small that to me the good outweighs the bad in this movie. And a lot of it has to do with casting because I am a huge Star Trek fan, as you know, of the original series, but I'm the
Yes.
one that's like so much a fan that I really don't like anything after that, except for a few of the movies with Kirk and maybe the first season of Strange New Worlds, and that's it. So just to
Okay.
go back and do those characters again and get the casting right, I was thrilled when I saw it.
Yeah, well, I will yes and that in the fact that the best thing about this movie is the cast
Mhm.
and the casting of it. Not necessarily the performances, but the casting
Mhm.
itself is very good. I had a different view just because, and that'll be interesting for us to have this conversation today
Mhm.
because I'm a huge Trekkie, always have been. Watched the original series. You and I share the love of the original series, but I have watched all of the movies. I have watched all the series with the exception of the very end, like the last 3 years of Deep Space Nine. And that's because I literally don't like any of the characters on that series. So it's hard for me to watch it, even though hardcore Trekkies or Trekkers say that you should watch it because it actually gets better then and everything else when Worf joins and all of the war happens and all of that. But anyway, and as people know listening, that I do like Babylon 5 and prefer it to some of these other series. But even Enterprise, which most fans didn't like, I liked. Nemesis, the last movie really done before this, most people didn't like, and I like parts of it. So I stood in line for 6.5 hours when the motion picture came out to see the first movie based on
I
my
think I
series
did
that I
too.
love.
And
Yeah.
then I felt like I was standing in line the whole time I was watching it.
It is a lengthy film. Tis
Yeah.
a lengthy film. The whole hierarchy of even numbers work, odd numbers don't, the movies and all of that. So I was excited to see this. And I remember seeing this in the theater. I remember watching it on DVD. I remember watching it a couple of times since. I've seen this movie probably 5 times just because I keep wanting to get
Like
that
it.
same initial reaction.
Mm.
Because I think my initial reaction was not bad, not a bad try. It's not Star Trek really, but it's cool and it's neat. And maybe more people will appreciate Star Trek now and go back to the original. But now watching it, especially with a more older, get off my, here's my lawn chair approach. No, I don't like this movie. I
Mm.
don't think this movie is good, but mostly because this movie is good for modern audiences, but it's not Star Trek.
Mm. I like
Well, I
this
think,
movie. I
mhm.
don't, I thoroughly loathe the second one, To
Hmm.
Darkness. I think it is probably one of the worst Star Trek films ever. But then I think they got back on board with Star Trek 3, and I was looking for a fourth film, but who knows? It's in
Beyond
limbo.
works because J.J. Abrams didn't direct it, and it was written by Simon Pegg, but it was literally just an extended episode
Mhm.
from the series. It needed a little bit more layer, I thought, but overall, of the three, I prefer it. I this team of Lindelof, Abrams, Kurtzman, Orsai, all of them did Fringe, which is another series that I really, really like. But I'm starting to think I like it because J.J. Abrams did the pilot and then he walked away because
So it's Abrams you have a problem with.
I think it is
Mm.
based on just his works in general. He tends to to screw stuff up. I mean,
Well,
I
he
listened
screwed
to
up Lost. I mean, Lost just went on. I don't know.
he screwed
Lost
up
just kind of
Lost. He screwed
spiraled.
up Star
Yeah.
Wars. He screwed up this, in my opinion.
If
And
he had
it's
anything to do with that second film, he definitely screwed this up.
this film. Oh yeah, he
No,
directed
I
the
don't
second
have a
one.
problem with this film. I already said that. It's the second film I have a big problem with.
Yeah, Beyond Dankness or whatever.
Mm.
Yeah,
Into
Into Darkness
Darkness. Yeah.
was the name of it. Yes, and but it's because from the very beginning, Abrams said he didn't like Star Trek. He preferred Star Wars and would rather have done that. But this team was so cool. He literally, I mean, I've got a quote where he says, I was going to be so jealous of whoever got to direct this that I decided to direct it myself. I mean, that's a quote that he said about it. I listened to a review of everything. And every time they mentioned JJ's name, this voice came on and said, franchise killer, sort of thing, because it must be JJ that I'm having issues with. But it's not. It's Alex Kurtzman, too, from our previous discussions about Discovery, and that I am not a Alex Kurtzman fan at all.
No. And there's no such thing as a franchise killer because there's always reboots. There's always reboots.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's my overall take on this was as a reboot. Yeah, I guess it works because to me, it feels like they're just checking off boxes. Oh, we need to figure out how McCoy gets his nickname. Here's a check a box. Oh, we need the first meeting between Kirk and Spock. Here's a box. Oh, we need that first majestic look at the Enterprise. Here's a box.
Those are expected, though. It is a pilot.
Right. And there's stuff like that in motion picture and in Wrath of Khan. And my big crux, which I'll probably repeat 9 times as we go through this, the thing that makes Star Trek is, yes, it has action. Yes, it has adventure. The NBC guys kept saying, put a fist fight in here for Kirk, rip Kirk's shirt, do stuff like that. You make it more action-y, add aliens. They wanted that, and then it is that. But the overall core, and we know from our Patreon show that all of the principal writers and executives and producers of the show said, what's the theme? What's the story? What's happening? And the thematics and the philosophy are what propelled Star Trek. And I think that's what's kept
and
Star
the
Trek
chemistry
going.
of those 3 actors, the core actors.
Correct.
Yeah.
But it's not just casting and stuff like that. It's about family. It's about friendship. It's about exploration. The adventure comes from what the unknown, not from us trying to figure out ourselves.
And not
so
from action event after action event. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is what this is.
It is a little too action-y. I mean, it moves at like 90 miles an hour and it really doesn't stop.
Yeah. And Beyond Darkness is even worse. I mean, Into Darkness is even worse.
That's the only one I've never seen more than once. I couldn't bring myself to watch it again. And now I'm curious. Maybe I should go watch it again. But
oh, you should. You definitely should. Because again, Spock gets angry. Spock gets upset. Spock doesn't act like Spock. And Benedict Cumberbatch, who is an incredibly prolific actor, is bad in it. And the overall core is Starfleet is bad. Starfleet is corrupt.
Yeah, it's not good. I remember. Anyway,
this
movie.
Scenes. I mean, JJ and Kurtzman are good at putting together moments. I do like the opening to this, although I do not like the cinematography at all and the style, but I like the action hook at the very beginning. We are just boom, and there's a big thing happening and we've got to figure out, and we end up destroying the Enterprise.
It's the Kelvin.
I'm sorry, the Kelvin. I guess that scene, I do like the first meeting with Bones and McCoy. And I think Carl Urban does a great job. I'm sorry, Kirk and McCoy, when he calls him Bones. All I've got left is my bones, the line. I like... There's not one scene
I love
with
that
Nero
first scene with the Kelvin because it was the first time in my life I had ever seen Chris Hemsworth. And I was like, holy shit, who is that?
Who'd that be?
I was like, as soon as I saw him, I was like, there's Captain Kirk. That should be Captain Kirk. But I was completely floored and a little bit flabbergasted by how hot he was. And I was like, that guy's going to be a movie star. It was like looking at Bruce Willis in 1985. I was like, oh, okay, movie star instantly. And sure as shit, then he became Thor.
Yeah, this is pre-Thor. Yes.
Yeah. And this was his first film, too.
I think the plot twist of the death of Amanda, Spock's mom, was a good scene.
I liked the way that's shot, the way she just falls out of range.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like Winona in that part too.
Yeah. Although I mean, it's three little bitty scenes, so it's
It's
not a
very,
lot
yeah,
of.
but she's also younger, I think, than Zachary Quinto. Or no, only a few years older than Zachary Quinto or something.
Yeah. I
It's in
mean,
my notes somewhere.
yeah. And she's not a Jane Wyman, but she does have a dignity she gives Amanda a dignity, which is good and necessary. I'm listening now in my head things that I don't like more than I like.
Well, I like one of the comedic scenes where Kirk is sleeping with the Orion slave girl or whatever, the Orion girl, and ends
Yep.
up being his roommate, and he ends up rolling under the bed, and it turns into this whole like college dorm scenario.
Yes.
I thought
Yep.
that was fun. I really enjoyed that. That was a great introduction to his flirtatiousness. I mean, it carries all the Shatner shit from the original series right into the present.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think and it also is a little bit better character development for him and Uhura.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, anything scenes? No other
Well, we're
scenes.
dancing around
Oh,
something.
I do like Pike's scene, and I think he delivers the best line in the movie, which is the challenge to Kirk.
In the bar.
Kirk is, he's got the things up his nose, and he's obviously hungover,
Yeah.
and he's still half
Beat
drunk and
up.
all
He's
that.
been beat to death practically. Yeah.
And Pike has the line about your father commanded a starship for 8 minutes. He saved, many people,
400 and something lives. Yeah.
including your mother and you. I dare you to do the same. And
Mhm.
walks away. I dare you to do better. That's it. And to me, that was a great. I think I do like Anson Mount in Strange New Worlds as Pike,
Mhm.
but I think
A plus.
is very strong in this
Yeah.
and very good because he's also in the second one because he's the motivator for the very beginning. He gets killed.
No,
So
don't remember. I repressed it.
yeah, I've seen it a few times too, just to hate more things. I wrote a review of Into Darkness. It was 7 pages long.
Yeah, I wouldn't have wasted my time.
I really didn't like that film.
There are some things in this movie that irritate me.
Mhm.
As far as like a scene, one is when the little kid Kirk drives the car off the cliff, and when the cop asks him his name, he says James Tiberius Kirk. I'm like, he wouldn't do that. He would just say Jim. It would have been more funny if he would have just said Jim, like a little mouse, instead of saying, I am James Tiberius Kirk. What kid do you know ever uses their middle name? Never.
Right.
Most
Never.
people hide from it. So, yeah, it was ridiculous.
Well, it was also defying the laws of physics and made no sense that in a Starfleet that's this Gene Roddenberry vision of optimism and niceness that the cop would look like he's from some dystopian George Orwellian thing. Is that a robot? Is that not a robot?
It's
We don't know.
THX-1138.
Yeah. And we're in Iowa, but we're in the desert. I don't understand that. I don't think there's a Grand Canyon in Iowa.
I didn't really even think about that, but that's the kind of little logic things that bother me that I still think the good outweighs the bad. Here's another one. Why is George Kirk's pregnant wife aboard the ship? Back then, they weren't like having families and family quarters and stuff. That came with Next Generation.
Right.
So why was she on a military ship about to have a baby? I didn't understand that. I mean, it was all for plot.
All of this movie is just for plot moments, not even moments that carry on, really, just for that moment. And that's the way it's written. That's the way Kurtzman also does Discovery. And it just doesn't work for me. It's a very Michael Bay Transformers approach. There's no substance to this. There's no depth. There's no meaning. Wrath of Khan had lots of action and lots of fights, and even had a scene where we put a bug in somebody to torture them to tell us what we want, which is a big homage key in this one. But the themes underneath it of old age and losing your friendship and losing your abilities and
They weren't like
challenging
Star Trek.
yourself.
Yeah.
That's what makes Star Trek. That's not in this at all, anywhere. As a matter of fact, the key motivation to this movie doesn't make any sense. First of all, a black hole can't invade a galaxy. A black hole is one little center-focused thing. So if it was Romulus's sun, it would make sense. And actually in Picard, they just retroact all of this and say that's what happened, that it was Romulus's sun that blew up and destroyed Romulus, not a black hole that Spock has to somehow stop to save Romulus, but he doesn't make it.
It's
but because
not a
he
black
doesn't,
hole. It's a supernova.
you're right, it's a supernova. Yeah.
And Spock uses the black hole, but it doesn't work, and it sucks them into an alternate timeline.
Alternate timeline, the Kelvin timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Which, I mean, all of that, I mean, sometimes I have trouble following time travel stories, but the time travel logic to this is okay to me. I don't mind it.
So you think it's fine that Nero literally sits and just hovers around the galaxy for 20 years?
I was wondering
rather than maybe go to Romulus and say, hey, I'm from the future and the planet's going to be destroyed unless we change it and do something now. Instead, he's going to wait 20 years.
Well, I was wondering if maybe that was because of the fact that George rammed that ship into his and maybe he was stranded.
I don't know.
No. I mean, because he did literally run a starship into that ship.
Right.
So something had to happen that could have incapacitated them for a while. I don't know if it'd be
20 years. Don't know about that. Don't know why the ship looks the way it does. It doesn't look like any other Romulan ship ever.
It looks like something out of the Borg or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird.
So that doesn't work. The entire motivation of this is vengeance against Spock. And why are you mad? He actually was trying to save your planet. And
I get the fact he's just crazy. I mean, he looks crazy like Jack Nicholson from the get-go.
Yeah, and he treats it that way. That's even in the first scene. For no reason, he doesn't speak at all, and then he just rears up and stabs the captain in the chest.
Yeah.
And because he doesn't know Spock.
Yeah, they make the Romulans very savage in this.
Yeah. And I don't mind seeing another facet of Romulus. Even in Nemesis, we got to meet the Remans, which were the slave race of the Romulans, which was a cool idea. So I don't mind seeing Romulan miners. I just don't understand why their ship is just a connected bunch of platforms with no rails and you can fall any freaking second into a thing.
That's another one of those little things that bothered me. I was like, what is with this? I mean, you could plummet to your death at any time you just took a misstep.
And that's why it's only there so that Kirk can hang off of it 3 different times or whatever. And your vengeance plot is not find Spock, make him recreate the black hole so I can go back in time and stop and be a little bit earlier maybe or something. It's find Spock so we can maroon him on a nearby planet and hopefully it's a clear day outside and there's no snowstorm happening and destroy Vulcan in front of him. What? None of that makes any sense at all.
I mean, the whole vengeance thing, I mean, I just feel like he's a madman. He's a venge-craved madman. But I still...
Well, and Kurtzman and Orkai did the same thing with the last season of Picard. They spent the first 3 episodes with a mad woman who was wanting to kill Jean-Luc. And that pulls him into the plot and gets us all started and everything else. But luckily, after about the 4th episode, they just got rid of that subplot and just went ahead and made the whole season get really good and great at the end. But it was that same vengeance for no reason, really.
So you're talking season 3?
Yeah. Which is the best season of Picard.
Well, you have said that. That's why I was confused, because it sounds like it didn't start off well.
It didn't, but also neither did season. And season 2 was all about this. It was all about Romulans meet Gary Seven. I mean, it just okay. No.
Well, anyway. I still think that the cast in this is extremely strong, and I would really like them to get better writers and do another movie, because I don't mind this cast. I don't mind the alternate timeline at all, as far as Spock having a thing with Uhura and whatever. else is different about it.
Well, 2 points. One, yes, I agree with you. And they've been trying, I think, for the past like 5 years to get them back again and
Oh
do
man,
a
there's
fourth.
4 different scripts.
Yeah. And do a
Yeah.
fourth film. And especially if it goes, where no man has gone before and explore something different other than a rogue Starfleet captain, a genocidal retread of the best movie and television series episode they ever did, or this. So yes, do something new and different and exciting and go there. As a matter of fact, you said this new timeline that they created. Do you know why they ended up having to do that or why they wanted to do that from a production standpoint?
Like ship design, maybe? I don't know, because the ship looks very different on the inside.
No, it was overall because the whole reason that this got greenlit and done and everything else is because, okay, so and this is just a little bit of history so everybody knows why we're playing in the same sandbox or not. Nemesis came out in 2002. That was the last film. That was number 10, the last film.
And that's Next
with
Generation cast, right?
Next Generation cast. It was panned really badly. A lot of people didn't like it. It was made extremely cheaply. And it was made, ironically, by a guy named Stuart Baird, who said he had never seen a Star Trek episode before he directed this movie. Just like J.J. Abrams, who said, I don't even like Star Trek. I prefer Star Wars. And I've even got him as quoted saying, I never knew what a neutral zone or Starfleet really were, but I thought I could make this movie look really cool. That was his quote that I have written down here.
Okay.
Anyway, but that's okay. Wait, who directed Wrath of Khan?
Nicholas Meyer.
Nicholas Meyer, who also had never seen a Star Trek episode, but still wrote wrote 2 of the best movies,
True.
That and Undiscovered Country.
And in all honesty, regardless of JJ's involvement with the past or the series, it's clear that the cast love the series, and a lot of them campaigned to get these roles, including Carl Urban and Simon Pegg.
So 2002, Nemesis comes out, meets with a very bad thing. Because of that and everything else, at the same time, Star Trek Enterprise is canceled abruptly. They were supposed to do 7 years, they did 4, and they canceled it. So Rick Berman and Eric Jendresen, I've got in my notes, started developing a new movie. Maybe we'll do an 11th movie, but we're going to call it Star Trek The Beginning. And it was going to be about a group of characters led by an ancestor of Kirk. Don't like that idea. Tiberius Chase was his name. But it was set during the Romulan Earth War. And I thought, okay, that sounds really cool and interesting. Unfortunately, never got greenlit, never got done. They were in development of it. But then in 2005, Viacom split from, which owned Paramount, separated from CBS. So Viacom pulled away. So you had Viacom and you had Paramount. Paramount controlled all the rights to the movies. Viacom controlled all the rights to the television series and all the intellectual property, essentially.
They're still married, though, because all the RuPaul stuff is MTV, Viacom, VH1, that stuff. And I know they're aired on Paramount.
Since then, they got bought back up and everything combined. That was 3 years ago.
All right.
But in 2005, they split. So Paramount, Rick Berman actually went to Paramount and said, hey, give me a year or give me 18 months. Give me some amount of time. Notes, 18 months. Give me 18 months. I'll develop a new Star Trek movie. Because they're going to take Star Trek away from us because they have all of the rights to the design work, everything else, blah, blah, blah. All we have is the movies. So let me do it. So he got together with Robert Orci, Alex Kurtzman, and Damon Lindelof, and they ended up developing this and even coming up with a Kelvin timeline so we can make all the fans happy. We'll put it in a totally different timeline. And that way we can design our own Star Trek stuff. Viacom and CBS can design their own Star Trek stuff, and we don't compete with each other. Yeah. Mm-hmm. One of my biggest issues with this is the cinematography all the way through it, but it may be why that JJ went with that aesthetic of the lens flares and the bridge that looks like an Apple store and all of that stuff. Maybe he did that so it would look so different than the original.
Yeah,
But keep the characters.
That stuff didn't bother me at all.
Oh my God, I hate it.
I'm telling you, it's the weird little things like that kid saying his full name bothers me. The fact that there's a pregnant woman on a battleship bothered me. Those are it was and it didn't outweigh the good to me with this film. So anyway,
okay, all right,
we'll agree to disagree.
We'll agree to disagree.
And another thing is that, like you said, it is nonstop action. I'm like, good Star Trek gave you breathers and some intense reflection, and you don't have as much of that until you get to Leonard Nimoy being in here, and then it gets a little bit of that.
Well, and that's solely because of Nimoy. He helped rewrite his own scenes. He worked toward it, and he is the only person that hints at anything deeper than a bunch of kids playing with toys, which is the way I think of every freaking character in this, except for Greenwood and Ty, head of Starfleet, Tyler Perry. They're the only ones with any gravitas in this movie. Everybody else is like, I'm a little kid and I'm having fun. And that's what I have issues with all the way through. I mean, it didn't bother you that Nero is coming through time, but before he even figures out what time he is in, he attacks the closest Federation ship. All of his weapons within the first barrage, the guy on the Kelvin says our shields are at 9%, and yet the rest of them don't do anything. All the shots and all the fighting and everything else, nothing else happens for like a good 15 minutes while we get off the ship and do the ramming speed and all. I mean, it just bugs me all the way through this.
What year is it?
Yeah, something like that would have been nice. Instead of, do you know Spock?
He says that. That's what he demands of the captain when he comes on board before he kills him. He asks him what year it is.
Yeah,
I literally think he's been floating in space for 21 years. He's finally got enough power to use weapons, and a ship happens along, and he just blasts it.
No, not the Enterprise, the Kelvin.
That's what I'm talking about.
He's not floating. No. As soon as he comes out, he attacks the Kelvin. That's him appearing in our time.
Oh, yeah.
Then he gets, quote, damaged. If for your point, he gets damaged by the Kelvin and has to rebuild his ship for 20 years.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. The damage would have come after that. You're right. Sorry. I got ahead of myself.
Okay. So little things. Did it bother you that Kirk's doing his Top Gun motorcycle? Look at my plane Enterprise bit. I hated that whole thing too.
When he's riding in the desert.
Yeah.
I mean,
not in the car.
Not the car as a kid, but the motorcycle as an adult. No.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't bother me, but to me, it was. I mean, there wasn't much to it. I would rather see interaction than him out being William Shatner on a motorcycle or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and also we've established in 10 movies and 7 series that spaceships are built in space, at space docks, the way the Federation works. And yet this one's built on the ground. We're building the Enterprise on the ground. Why? Just like I said, plot. The only reason is just for that shot, to show the young Kirk looking at the Enterprise being built.
Yeah, well, I mean, but that's also something that I don't know most folks would even know. I mean, if you're a hardcore Star Trek person, you're going to know that. But I mean, they were trying to make this appeal to the average moviegoer. That's why a lot of the stuff was
lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of action for no reason.
Exactly.
Okay.
They were trying to please both, and clearly they didn't please you. But they did please modern audiences. So
yeah, okay.
Should we move on to cast?
Sure.
Which is the strength of the movie, obviously.
It is.
I've got that Majel Barrett, the wife of Gene Roddenberry, is the voice of the Enterprise computer. She completed this work 2 weeks before she died.
Mm-hmm.
which is sad. They dedicated
It
this
is.
movie to the two of them. Tyler Perry, who you mentioned, does a cameo because he's
Mm-hmm.
such a huge fan of it. He was another one of those that campaigned to be in this movie. I
Mm-hmm.
read a funny story about him somewhere where he flubbed a take and actually called cut, and because he's directed so many films, he accidentally took the director position and shouting cut. Chris Pine is the role of Kirk. It came down between Mike Vogel, who I don't really know who that is. Do you know who that is?
No.
I should have had that in my notes. I'm not sure why I don't. Oh, yeah, I do. He's the guy from the movie we ended up surprisingly liking last season, Cloverfield.
Oh,
Another
okay.
J.J. Abrams movie. Yeah, he was one of the brothers in Cloverfield. And Chris
Okay.
Pine. Vogel was reportedly the front runner, but apparently Abrams cast Pine last minute. Other people that auditioned for the role were Joshua Jackson from Dawson's Creek.
I like him.
I like
And
him, but
Fringe.
I don't see him in that part.
Right. I agree.
And Chris Prangley, do we know who he is?
Do not know him.
I don't
Mm-mm.
either. Why do I not have this? I have a picture of him here, but I don't know what he's in. He was in Criminal Minds, so you should know him. He was Joshua Sanderson on Criminal Minds.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Well, Matt Damon mentioned that he called J.J. Abrams when he heard rumors that he was being considered for the role. Now, Matt Damon, I could see doing it, but he's too old.
Yeah.
I could see him doing it as a young guy. And that's exactly what happened. Abrams gave him a very polite, no, you're a little too old for what I have in mind. Other people, Chris Pratt auditioned. I don't see that at all.
No, I'd put him in the Hemsworth role.
Yeah,
He could
I can see
do
that. That's
his
fine.
father.
Then Chris Pine was cast. He sent Shatner a letter and got Shatner's approval. I thought that was noble of him.
Yep.
I was also very noble of Shatner. I'm surprised he didn't ask to do the part. He based his performance on Tom Cruise's Maverick and Harrison Ford's Han Solo.
Yeah, I could see both of those as
Yeah.
keys. Yep.
He said they were heroes who Pine felt possessed that archetype of heroic qualities like Kirk, and that's why he chose them.
Well, yeah, the arrogance and the humor too.
Zachary Quinto played Spock. Apparently, before he was cast, Adrian Brody was in discussions to do the part. I don't see that at all, really.
I could see that, but he'd probably make a better father.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Leonard Nimoy reprises the role of Spock Prime.
Yes.
Spock Prime. I like how they give him that.
In the Prime universe, yes.
Yeah, he had received invitations over the years, numerous invitations, but always turned them down. But he thought he was thoroughly, I don't know, captivated by the three you mentioned, Abrams, Orsi, and Kurtzman. And they told him, we can't make this film without you, and we won't make this film without you. So after they left his home, apparently Susan, Nimoy's wife, told the guys that Leonard was silent for a long time, sitting in his chair and very overwhelmed. And he decided to do it because of the script's scope, I guess, because of the different timelines. I don't know what he means by scope.
Yeah, they pitched him. What I have in my notes is they actually pitched him the whole timeline thing and said nobody would know their fate. We're suddenly throwing it into a totally new area where we could do new adventures and new things and blah, blah, blah.
And bring back the original characters. Yeah. He said, we have dealt with Spock being half human and half Vulcan, but never with the overview that this script has of the character's entire history, his growth, his beginnings, and his arrival to the Enterprise crew. He found that interesting, so he agreed to do it. It probably didn't hurt that Nimoy was actually longtime friends with J.J. Abrams' parents. Did you know that?
I did not, but
there's a lot of nepotism in this movie. I noticed it when I was doing. I was noticing it when I did the cast stuff. Eric Bana played Nero, the villain. This is the only choices Abrams had for this role were Eric Bana and Russell Crowe. It'd have been interesting to see Russell Crowe.
Well,
I
they're
think
very
he would.
similar, and basically he does a Russell Crowe impression for most of this with that
Well,
voice.
and Russell Crowe would have downplayed it more. It would have been less yelling and craziness, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the opposite end, we have Bruce Greenwood, who is quite a good actor that you and I have discovered thanks to Mike Flanagan,
Yes.
is Captain Pike. He is the third Quebec-born actor to be cast as a Starfleet captain after Shatner and Genevieve Bujold. And Bujold was cast as Janeway, but apparently stepped down after shooting the pilot or while shooting the pilot. I didn't know that.
During the pilot, after only like 1 week of shooting. Yeah.
Did she get pissed off or something?
She didn't. She said she could not handle the pressures of that much, what she called gobbledygook, which was technobabble and all the science. She wasn't a science fiction fan. And so it didn't work for her. So she quit. And they had to scramble and they delayed production, I think, for X number of weeks. Found, what's her name, who played Janeway all the way through it? Kate Mulgrew.
Mulgrew. Is she a science fiction person?
She also struggled too. She said
I was
it
going to
was
say,
very
she doesn't
difficult.
strike me as a sci-fi person.
She didn't at first, and
Okay.
she struggled with it for, she said it took her probably 6 episodes, I think I remember seeing somewhere, before she really felt like she was in Janeway's skin again, you know,
Gotcha.
or to begin with. Yeah.
I like her as an actress, though.
Yeah, she's a great actress.
Yeah.
I loved her in Orange is the New Black. I thought
Yeah,
she was
she's
great.
awesome in that. Before Bruce Greenwood, someone else was considered for the role of Pike, but I think he would have been too young. And it's Josh Lucas, who I also like a lot.
Yeah, but too young.
He
Yeah.
was in Sweet Home Alabama, and I think he's in that Yellowstone show now.
That would have been the part I would have thrown Shatner. Play Pike. I think that would have been interesting.
Oh, I think that would have been way too much nepotism.
Hey, there's a lot in here already. Who cares?
I know, but I mean, I couldn't see Kirk playing a different character. Shatner. See, I can't even divorce the name.
Well, especially not in Star Trek. No.
Carl Urban.
I mean, he was a cop, Tim. He was T.J. Hooker. I mean, come on.
I know. He was,
And he was Denny Crane. Denny Crane is one of his best characters.
He was also in $6 Million Man. Is that astronaut you told me about?
Good episode. Yeah.
Carl Urban was cast with his first audition. No surprise there, because he's one of the strongest people in this cast, I think.
Very.
And he emulates DeForest Kelley so well without going into caricature to me. I think he's great at it.
It's the attitude, and he's so well written with the way he's on Kirk's side in one scene, he's on Spock's side in another scene. He sees them both. That's the way McCoy was in the series, which worked.
Another person that was considered because he has a strong resemblance to DeForest Kelley. I don't buy this at all because he's too old, but it was Gary Sinise.
No.
It doesn't match the cast age at all, so it wouldn't work. It's the exact opposite of what I said earlier. But he was rumored, and then another considered was James Marsden, who would have probably been the right age at the time. But I just think Carl Urban's better at it.
Yeah.
He looks more like Bones to me.
Hmm?
Zoe Saldana plays Uhura. There was someone else that auditioned for this role that we've spoken about recently. You want to know who that is?
No, who?
Sydney Tamilia Portier.
Oh, really?
The girl that was
I could have seen her do it. Yes.
Yeah, Death Proof. We talked about her last week in the double feature Grindhouse. I don't have it in my notes, but I read somewhere where Zoe was completely unfamiliar with the show, but that her grandmother talked her into it.
Yes, I read that too.
I think that's cool. Simon Pegg was very well aware of the show.
Huge fan.
He did not audition. He simply received an email from J.J. Abrams asking him if he would play Scotty. Pegg says he would have done it for free or even paid Abrams to be in the movie if he had not been offered the role. Obviously a huge fan, But I don't think Simon Pegg is Scottish because he was assisted by his wife, Maureen Pegg, who is Scottish. She's from Glasgow, in developing the accent.
Yes, yeah, and there's a wink and a nod to James Doohan as Scotty, but not, and he does it in his own way, his own style, totally different. He also, in my opinion, has the second best line in the movie, which is after the huge fight and everything on the bridge. He goes, "I like this ship." Out of the blue, and
it's like he's like
him.
It sounds like the Beatles, like one of the Beatles shouting out something. The Fab Four, yeah, it's pretty funny,
just for no reason. It's great.
John Cho plays Sulu.
Yeah.
James Kyson was interested in the role of Hikaru Sulu, but the producer of Heroes were not keen on having two of their leading cast members away for 3 months. So Heroes was still shooting at the time, and Zachary Quinto was the villain, Sylar on that show. I watched one season of it. The Korean actor John Cho was initially uncertain about being cast as a Japanese American officer, Hikaru Sulu, because he's Korean. George Takei, who played Sulu on Star Trek, encouraged him to take the role, as Sulu is a character who represents all of Asia. So, and I think that's very wise. I think that makes sense to me. I don't know, and he's good. I had no problems with him. I like the scene where him and Kirk do the sky jump down to the thing.
You do? Okay.
Yeah. I do.
Well, good, because they do it in both other movies too.
Oh yeah, they do, don't they? I can't. Like I said, I don't really.
And they do it 3 times on Discovery.
Well, that was obviously someone's favorite stunt.
I guess
one of the writers.
Because I don't care what suit you're wearing, you're not going to survive an atmosphere fall. But that's okay.
Maybe it's diamond.
No.
Anton Yelchin plays Chekhov.
Yes.
He's great. I mean, he is very strong in this. And sadly, we lost him a few years ago to a very horrible car.
Accident.
Yeah, a very freak accident between 2 cars crushing him. That's a shame, because I would love to see him. And I don't even like the role of Chekhov, but I liked him in it.
I think he's probably one of the most memorable in this, and in the supporting cast. But that's another thing they know they have a strong cast, and they give them each moments to shine. Zoe sometimes a little bit more than everybody else, but they each have moments that work and are good. Although there's nothing deeper than, like I said, it's a bunch of kids saying, "Hey, look at me, this is my scene now, I'm really good."
Well, I was going to say that, but at least they're not dwelling on the secondary characters the way they do on Strange New Worlds. They focus on the
Thank
prime.
God.
Yeah, exactly. They focus on the prime 3, and the others are just small vignettes, like Chekhov running to the transporter room, or Uhura in her dorm room, or whatever. Yeah. Ben Cross plays Sarek. I think he's a great choice for this role.
Excellent choice.
We know him well. He was in Chariots of Fire, but I know him from the reboot of Dark Shadows. He played Barnabas in that. It only lasted 1 season. Winona Ryder played his wife, Amanda Grayson. Winona is only 6 years older than Zachary Quinto. That's where I had it in my notes. I thought that was funny. But it didn't matter. The makeup looked great on her. She looked older. And she is 24 years younger than Ben Cross. She was cast in the role instead of someone old enough to be Quinto's mother, because it was originally to begin with a scene of Amanda giving birth to Spock, but that got scrapped after, I guess, production commenced. So they wanted a younger version that they could use for a flashback, maybe. I don't know.
And again, I struggle with her because, like I said, I think I like her in this role, and I think she could have had some more. Although she just serves the purpose of being Amanda for the sole thing of Spock losing his mom, in addition to his planet, to give us some emotional reaction. Even though we haven't had scenes where we saw her, so we could build up an emotional reaction.
They probably shouldn't have killed her. They should have just had her get rescued and the planet get destroyed.
That would have been just as fine.
Yeah,
Although it didn't
that
make
way we
sense
would
to
have
me
had
either.
her. Yeah.
And I've got in my notes why. Okay, they spend all this time with Spock as a young boy, showing that obviously the Vulcans are pretty frickin' racist.
Yeah.
They don't like humans at all. But even later on, when Spock is graduating, they go, despite your human mother, which makes him pissed off, and that's why he joined Starfleet. But then the Vulcan High Council has Amanda as part of it. Why would the human be there? She would not even be allowed in the private sanctuary, probably. But she
No.
has to be there because Spock has to rescue her. So, and lose her. That's the only
I was
reason.
assuming, I just assumed she was there because she was with Sarek. I didn't know she was actually a part of it, but I don't
Well,
know.
he said that's why he's going there. That's where the High Council will be. My mother will be there too. And I went, why? Why would she be there? Vulcans hate humans, obviously.
I do like, and this is getting away from Cass for a second. I
Hmm.
like the way they do the duality of Kirk and Spock solo before they come together. Because they
Oh
both
yeah.
are like rebels in their own way. And I like the mirror of that in this a lot. That was something that felt genuine to me.
Yes, with their, although we don't get the fact that they realize they're each rebels to
No.
join, to help bond them
Well,
together.
and
That would have been part
yeah,
of it.
yeah, they may have could have punched that up a little bit when Spock finally decides to work with him, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned Chris Hemsworth. This is his feature film debut as George Kirk. He is 3 years younger than Chris Pine. I love
Hmm.
all this casting where the parents are younger than the kids.
Then the kids, yeah.
Yeah. And then Jennifer Morrison played Winona Kirk. She basically is around just to give birth to a baby, and that's it. And that's my big grievance of that early on. Awards. This actually won an Oscar. Did you know that?
Effects,
Makeup.
makeup.
It won for makeup. It was nominated for sound mixing and editing and visual effects. So it was nominated for 4 and it won one tech award, basically. The Academy of Sci-Fi, Fantasy, and Horror, the Saturn Awards, nominated it for SF Science Fiction Film, Director, Writing, Makeup, and Production Design, but it did not win any. Would you like to guess what won?
Yes, please.
Avatar. Another of your favorite movies.
Mm-hmm.
This movie is not on the 1001 movies you must see before you die list, and I get that. I get that it's more of a fan service movie than it really is a quality movie, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
There's so many instances where if you don't know Star Trek, you don't get the in joke or the reference that they're making. If you
yeah,
do know it, you do, and that's okay. But the pace is so frenetic and the camera work is just so even on the I can understand if you're saying, okay, when we're aboard the Romulan mining weird spiky ship, we're going to use Dutch angles and everything's going to be tilted and weird and all that. That's okay because we've designed that whole ship to be weird and
it
not
is
make
weird. Yeah,
sense. But he does it all the way through. He does it on the bridge. He does it in the corridors. He does it in our engineering rooms, which look strangely like a brewery. Why? Because they are. They filmed it at a Budweiser plant, so they wouldn't have to build those sets. And yet there's all these great big valves and tubes and Willy Wonka stuff and everything. And I'm going, why is this in a Star Trek ship? It makes no sense. Anyway,
did you have any trivia before we move on to keys? We're running a little long here.
I'm sorry. No, don't
It's
mean
all
to
right.
run long.
No,
I've just been
I've been
bitching
rambling
and
too.
moaning.
I have some trivia. Only certain people were given access to the film during the secretive production. It was a highly, highly secretive production. And
Makes
those
sense.
people were Roddenberry, or that's Rod Roddenberry, the son of Gene, Ronald Moore, Nichelle Nichols, Walter Koenig, Jonathan Frakes, Ben Stiller. Why Ben Stiller? Tom Cruise and Steven Spielberg. Now, Tom Cruise is because he did Mission Impossible with J.J. Abrams. I get that. I don't understand why
And
he would be allowed on
Kurtzman.
set.
Yeah.
Anyway, and Spielberg It's Steven Spielberg. But according to the Blu-ray commentary, Abrams had a meeting with George Lucas. During this meeting, he asked how he could make this film better, and Lucas said, add lightsabers,
Mm-hmm.
which is typical.
Yep.
It's the first film to list the cast in alphabetical order rather than by the leads. I thought that was an interesting choice.
Okay.
Basically trying to reflect that it's an ensemble, which makes you think, ooh, going further, they are going to delve more into these secondary characters, which is not my favorite thing. And the final shot of the USS Enterprise, the windows are Morse code. They spell out Khan, which I hate. I think that's stupid.
Yeah.
And then the only other trivia I had was that Kirk, Sulu, and Olsen's space jump from Pike's shuttle to the Romulan energy drill. The Kirk's first scene in Star Trek Generations was supposed to show him doing a similar orbital skydive, and the scene was even filmed but deleted. I hate that movie, so I don't care. But yeah, Generations, I just don't like that movie at all.
No,
That's the Malcolm McDowell movie.
Yeah, that's one where Kirk dies.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a good, that's one of the even numbers. I mean, the odd numbers. The odd numbers are bad, the even numbers are good. So
well, speaking of Shatner, I didn't say this earlier. I thought I had it in my notes, but he also campaigned to be in this movie.
Yeah.
And when Abrams talked to Nimoy about it, Nimoy said no. He said,
yeah,
it would totally wreck what's been done with the franchises so far, and it would not make sense to the story whatsoever. So,
right. Yeah, he didn't fit in this particular creation of the Kelvin timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as keys, if you're ready, I'm going to say Grindhouse. And the reason is this movie is filled with Easter eggs everywhere. And so was Grindhouse. Other than that, they don't really have that much else in common.
I will say Willy Wonka, just because Scotty gets in a tube, just like
I did not like that
sucked up and it makes no sense. Why? A, why would they need that much cooling? B, why would it be that way? And C, why do you design it so it has a port, a gate, the door, whatever that opens up right before the chompers?
I would call it a flue.
Yeah. But that leads to my second one, which is Galaxy Quest.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a good one.
Two things. One, that little blade spinning to create some sort of suspense for Scotty is just as stupid as the chompers, and thrown in just like the chompers in Galaxy Quest, but also Galaxy Quest because Sulu, his basic introduction to us is he can't fly the ship. Just like the kid in Galaxy Quest, even down to pushing the freaking gear shift. Why a starship has a gear shift, I don't understand either, but that's okay. So anyway, there's that.
They were trying to make him human so he could make a mistake. I'm going to say THX 1138 because I didn't think about it until you mentioned that cop on the motorcycle or chasing him on the motorcycle. I was like, it does look like a robot or something. It looks weird.
I'm going to say a weird one too, Cloverfield, because the creature that for no reason is thrown in to chase Kirk into the just so happens to be the same cave as Spock on the planet looks like the Cloverfield monster. Same thing with the weird triple arms and all the weird mouth and all that Cloverfield monster.
Okay,
it's
funny that you said that because I was going to say The Empire Strikes Back because of the monster in it that's after Luke.
Monster in the Snow. That's a good one. Yeah. Wrath of Khan twice. Once they mentioned the Kobayashi Maru, which by this time in the Federation, everybody knows is a no-win scenario, so there's no suspense to it whatsoever. Why even give the test? Because you're going to fail going into it. You cannot beat it. So there's no suspense to it. And second, the torture worms, Wrath of Khan. In this one, it's some weird thing that he puts in Pike's mouth. In Wrath of Khan, it's in the ear. So,
yeah. Back to what you were saying about Cloverfield. Really, any Star Trek movie or series is going to be a key to this. And
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
much any J.J. Abrams thing is going to be a key to
Yep.
this. So it makes sense that we're saying things like Cloverfield as well.
Which I have. So my Star Trek references and thing would be
Sure.
the original series, because when Pike first sits down in the command chair, he has the light across his eyes, just like Kirk used to have, and it looked great. And I was going, okay, that's the kind of homage I like. If it wasn't just obliterated by another one of the multi-thousands of lens flares, but it was a cool homage there. And then motion picture, because even though Kirk is almost to pass out, he and McCoy are looking and they do the flyby of the Enterprise, just like a motion picture. It's only like 30 seconds as opposed to 8 freaking minutes in the motion picture. So
Yeah, that
works.
movie. I mean, I think almost fell asleep in that movie. It was slow.
It's slow, but Robert Weiss, not the best one to direct that particular
No,
one.
you know how much I love him, but it's not a great movie. I've got these are things I caught from IMDb. We're talking about Star Trek references. Apparently, Leonard McCoy mentions joining Starfleet after his divorce. This refers to something DC Fontana had written for the original series that was never filmed. It was an unused subplot established that he had a failed marriage and a daughter named Joanna.
Joanna. Yeah.
I didn't know anything about that.
Well, we haven't gotten to the 3rd season yet in our exploration of the original series. That's when it comes out in the production office.
And I probably remember 3rd less than others, but
yeah,
because I probably watched it less than others.
There is another homage reference, though. They mention Admiral Archer, and Archer is Scott Bakula's character in Enterprise. He was one of the original he was the original captain of the first Enterprise. And Scotty makes the reference of he warped his dog. And he said, "How's the dog?" And he goes, "I'll tell you when he reappears." So he obviously killed him. Porthos is the name of the dog. And that's a big deal in Enterprise. He keeps a dog in his private quarters.
Interesting.
I've got J.J. Abrams Lost, because when they get to the 14 kilometers away is a Federation outpost that just happens to be on this planet near Vulcan. When they get inside it, it looks just like all the corridors and everything from the Dharma Initiative on Lost.
Okay. It's been a while since I saw that.
Yeah.
I mentioned Avatar earlier, but there's a key to Avatar as well, because Uhura falls in love with Spock, who is half human, half extraterrestrial. And in Avatar, Neytiri, an extraterrestrial, falls in love with Jake Scully, a human.
I can see that. Star Wars, of course, because that shot that I hate where he's sitting on his motorcycle just looking lovingly at the Enterprise being built is just like Luke and the twin sons moment.
I kind of got that vibe too. I was like, is
Yeah.
he just trying to make Iowa look like Tatooine?
I guess that's why. Yeah.
Or is there just a desolate place of Iowa I'm unaware of? I've never
Well,
been to
and
Iowa.
one of the pluses to this movie too that I didn't mention is the music. Giancano's music is great in this. As a matter of fact, I do like the theme. I like the theme a lot, and I use it sometimes. Like when I'm on trips and stuff, I'll sometimes put in that song right when we're landing, just because no matter where we are in the landing process, whether we clear the clouds or whether I just see the airport or whatever, it works with that music.
Yeah.
That music is so inspiring.
Well, and I like that he did not use the original until the very end.
And then he used all of them. He used all of the themes in the ending credits.
Oh, I didn't know he used all of them. I just heard the first one, I guess.
Yeah, they're all in there. Yeah.
Interesting. I've got 2001, A Space Odyssey, because of the design of the Enterprise that was influenced by sleek modernist work of an artist named Pierre Cardin and the realistic sets from the landmark science fiction film 2001.
Although
it is very sleek looking. It's a very clean, like sterile look. And so is 2001.
Yes. But it's also very white, very acrylic, they do the same thing in Discovery.
Mm.
I mean, the floors are shiny, the walls are shiny, the doors are shiny, everything is like reflective. And also don't like the swoopy nacelles. I don't like swoopy nacelles.
Swoopy what?
The nacelles, the two reactor nacelles on this version of the Enterprise are all like curved and swoopy. I don't look at keys. I've got, well, of course, you mentioned it, all the other series, but definitely the new, what they are now saying is Prime, but I swear to God, it's Kelvin in aesthetic, at least, series that have come since this movie. So Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, all three feel like they're Kelvin, even though they're not. They say they're not.
Okay. I see what you're saying. I didn't know. I was like, are they? I had no idea. Hmm.
Yeah, they said at first when Discovery first came out that it's probably going to be set in the Kelvin timeline, but then they said no, it's Prime. This was actually a ship that was before the Enterprise, and this was the Enterprise before the Enterprise that had a spore drive and advanced transport, all the stuff that I complained about with Discovery. But then it goes forward in time 3,000 years, and then we have the rest of the series. So it makes no freaking sense. And then supposedly Strange New Worlds is in the Prime timeline. So that is this same Pike, not this Pike, but that is the same Pike that Shatner's Kirk encounters, supposedly.
I'm looking at a thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack.
Just not listen to me. That's okay.
No, I'm
We can
not
just hang
listening.
out.
Yes, sorry.
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
just. I've heard this for 40 something years.
Yeah, I know. Same stuff.
You mentioned the original series. Well, we mentioned how there's ties to any Star Trek franchise or whatever, but there are particular episodes that I got from IMDb. Balance of Terror is one because of the Romulan encounter for the first time. Wrath of Khan is another. Yesterday's Enterprise, a black hole causes the past and future Enterprise crew members to meet each other.
The best episode of Next Generation. Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay. So it's Next Generation. You're right. I see the year now. And then the Star Trek novels, Prime Directive, Spock's World, and Best Destiny. The latter focusing on Kirk and his maturity into a Starfleet captain. So
yeah, that's the other
there's
thing too. I mean, we give it to them because we know that Sulu is supposed to be the helmsman. We know that Chekhov's supposed to be the navigator. We know that Uhura is supposed to run communications. Yet in this reality, all of them are cadets. They haven't even graduated Starfleet yet, and yet they're in charge of the flagship. They're also command rank officers on the flagship.
Well, they kind of cheated with that, saying that all the ships were out of range and that the cadets were closest.
Right.
You did.
Okay,
and that's when Pike said, man up.
Yeah. Right.
So there you go. Battleships. I don't know if you mentioned the Even movies are good, and Star Trek The Voyage Home, there's something that connects it when Kirk tells Spock coming back in time, changing history, that's cheating. Spock responds with a trick I learned from an old friend.
From an old friend.
And that's reference to Kirk and Star Trek The Voyage Home when he has the bird of prey travel to the past to capture the humpback whales in order to prevent the destruction of their timeline, Earth KB351, whatever that means.
I do like the line that Spock Prime says about, since my normal salute would be something self-serving, I'll simply say good luck. That was good. I liked that. And you could tell that was a Nimoy line. I don't think any of the creatives of this would have even thought of being able to say that or write that.
The last key I also lifted from IMDb, but I mean, it was fairly obvious. And that is a classical key. That is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where Nero is clearly Nemo. They even just changed one letter in the name. Who is this obsessed captain out for, in this case, out for vengeance.
But then would you also say Moby Dick because of Ahab?
I would, but he's not really after the ship. He's after, or a whale. He's after Spock. But here's what IMDb says. It says he is a self-absorbed commander with a second in command from a lost Romulan empire seeking revenge against the Federation for the destruction of his home and family with the use of extremely advanced technology. As well, before the Federation is aware of the origin of the distress signals, a fleet is sent, the starship Farragut among them. In Verne's novel, Captain Farragut is the command of the expedition to track the sea monster, which ends up being Nemo's submarine.
Yeah.
So it's not only the theme or motive, it's the names. I mean, they basically said Nero instead of Nemo, and they used the name Farragut. So they're directly lifting from those novels by Verne.
Yeah. If we had been given a little bit more of Nero and maybe what drove him to this, the way we're given Nemo in 20,000,
yeah,
it
sure.
might have been better. You know?
Yeah, it's not Jules Verne that wrote the screenplay.
No, it's Alex
But I'm gonna
Kurtzman,
put
who
Moby
unfortunately
Dick.
is still in charge of the Star Trek franchise. Unfortunately.
Did you say James Abrams is?
Alex Kurtzman.
Okay, because I don't have all this information, but I'll briefly close. But before we started today, I went and looked to see what is happening because there are 4 scripts out there. One was a direct sequel to the last movie. I can't remember the name of it. The last Star Trek movie.
Beyond.
Yeah.
Was the
Star
name
Trek
of it.
Beyond. There was a direct sequel to that. There's the one that Quentin Tarantino wrote that he wants to direct.
Yeah.
I think Simon Pegg may have written one. I can't remember, but there's 4 floating out there, and they've gone to bat several times. At one point, they said they were going to bat, and they didn't even have the cast all signed on yet. But and then COVID and the writer strikes. I mean, they just keep getting these obstacles where it makes you seem like it's never going to happen. I don't know. I hope it does, though.
Well, the one that I heard, which was the latest, which I think I told you and you got excited, was Noah Hawley.
Yes,
Noah Hawley
that's the 4th one.
He's been hired to develop a script. And immediately, I think Hemsworth and Pine got excited because they like Noah Hawley, obviously.
Who doesn't?
So, well,
but Hawley has since gone on to do Alien, so he may have just given up.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how they'll ever get it all back again, nor if they should really. I mean, like I said, I would like to see these actors in these roles have a good script that's not based on action point after action point.
Or anything to do with the past Star Trek universe.
Yeah, I mean, brave new worlds, explore strange new worlds. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's why I like Beyond, because it was a little different. I hated Into Darkness because when I found out the villain was Khan, I was ready to walk out of the theater. I was like, this is insane.
Well, yeah,
why
the villain
would you do that?
I mean, Into Darkness is studio heads trying to shore up a franchise and say, well, the most popular movie was this, so let's redo that.
No.
The same way JJ, when he was brought to Star Wars, said, well, the most popular movie was New Hope. Let's do that, which is what he did. What I really go back to is what we liked about Star Trek, and what a lot of new Star Trek doesn't do is be optimistic. That was the whole point about Roddenberry, was even though we may have some sad moments in our storytelling, overall, the Federation and these characters are optimistic about we can rise above it. We can be better than. It was this very altruistic philosophy. And that is not in Discovery. That is not in Picard. That is definitely not in any of these 3 movies. As a matter of fact, in Into Darkness and From Beyond, the bad guys, in addition to Khan, are Starfleet admirals who are both corrupt and awful and evil and wanting to do bad stuff. So it's like, okay, let's go back to Star Trek. Let's make it good again. So,
well.
That's what we think.
That's what we think. I like this movie. This movie gives me nostalgic pangs that are deliciously scratched in places. David is a little less enthusiastic about it.
It's a nice roller coaster ride as long as you don't like Star Trek.
Yeah,
but
that's
it is
just
not
the way
Star
it goes. Some things
Yeah.
will never change.
Yeah.
Don't you believe it? And we would like to thank you for joining us today. If you liked some of our Star Trek banter, there's plenty more over on Patreon where we would love to have you as a supporter. We have 2 entire seasons of the first original series already up, and we will be working on a 3rd in the future, as well as X-Files Declassified. And if you're not looking to do that, there's also other shows we have on YouTube. We have Coming to Get Yous, as well as Top Fives and this show, our show, Johnny has. And until next time, David, I believe we're going to go back in time a little bit, but definitely in the land of horror. And you're in
I really
hands.
think that, I mean, we've had 2 episodes and I haven't been a happy camper, but I think I'll be happy next week.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. I will see you then.
All right.
Right. Bye.
Bye.
Can't start the car. Johnny has the